I have played a lot, and I mean a lot, of Mario Maker 2 levels. Most of these levels I played on my journey to get the Royal Crown and attire, but that means I've seen a lot of good and bad levels. So today, I want to give you all tips on how to make your levels better. Now, I'm not just going to give 10 tips, or 50 tips, or even 100. I'm going to be giving 150 tips and tricks on how to make your levels better in Mario Maker 2. So what I'm going to do is give at least one tip for every single item in Mario Maker 2. Now these can be do's or don'ts, as both are equally important. Now if I think of some extra things, then I can have more than one per item. I'll be starting with the items found in the 4 main themes, then end with the 3D World exclusive items. Also, I know some of my demonstrations may not look good aesthetically, but these levels were made more as a demonstration, so just keep that in mind. So since we have a lot to cover, without much further ado, let's jump right into it. Also, minor spoilers for story mode. Before we get started, I want to give some general tips. First off, give your levels a theme. Whether it be based around pipes in the sky, or seesaws, try to come up with a gimmick and expand upon it. Some of the tips I'm giving today can be used in most, if not all, levels, while some will be gimmicks that you can build levels around. So if you're interested, try them out. Avoid trolling the player. In this list we'll go through some of the trolls, but generally don't do this. This will just annoy the player. Avoid using too many sound effects, as they get annoying really fast. Speaking of, attach music to enemies or Mario himself, as this provides for a smooth music track that plays throughout the level, while instead of just placing it everywhere, which can sometimes blink in and out. Make sure your level theme goes well with the gimmick. Don't just have it be underground for no reason, make the theme fit the level. Don't kill the player in the first few seconds, as it'll make them automatically boo your level. Add breathing room to your levels. Besides maybe speedrun levels, breathing room is always nice to have, especially in standard levels. Don't have boss fights in your level if you want it to be tagged multiplayer versus, because it's pretty annoying to be in first place and then get halted by a boss fight. Speaking of multiplayer versus, rising lava that either goes above the starting area or a pipe is generally not good for multiplayer. If you're looking for hearts, you're going to want to aim your levels at the normal difficulty, as they generally get more hearts than the other difficulties. Avoid adding really difficult jumps into slow auto-scrollers. I already hate auto-scrollers as it is, and if you have a really hard jump, and if you just mess up, you have to play through the whole level again, it's just going to lead to people skipping your level and possibly booing it. Don't add clear conditions to your levels unless they are necessary. I've seen quite a few levels that require you to complete a clear condition, like collect a spring for example, but then just have a spring at the end, which is just completely pointless. Playtest your levels several times. This is really the only way to judge if it's ready. Also, playtest it from the start sometimes as well, so you can get an understanding of the flow of your level. Now, what's more important than playtesting it yourself is to have someone else playtest it. Since you're the creator, you're going to know how to beat it and beat all the puzzles. But if someone else tries it out, they won't know. This is the best way to get feedback for your levels, and this definitely has helped me make better levels. But anyways, starting with the terrain, we have the ground. Avoid keeping grounds 1 block thick, specifically in the later game themes, as they don't look so good. As a second tip for ground, try to use the ground decorations to alert invisible blocks or other secrets. This could be a good way to signal for players to find them. This is extra effective if you don't use ground decorations a lot in your level. Slopes are pretty useful for practical purposes, but they are also very good for decoration. Sticking with decorations, you can combine steep and gentle slopes to make more curved surfaces. I use this in pretty much all of my levels for good aesthetic. Always complete your pipes. Not having pipes with blocks behind it looks very bad and unprofessional. All it takes is 2 blocks to make your pipes look so much nicer. For a second one for pipes, if you have an item that's required to beat your level, then putting them in pipes will allow the player to retry, just in case they fail. Never make underwater spike mazes, they are not fun. The stems and mushroom platforms can be used for decoration, or they can be used to warn the player. For example, we can place a mushroom stem here, so the player knows that Munchers will fall there. Semisolid platforms work really well as backgrounds. You can only place 5 semi-solids on top of each other before they start getting deleted, so be careful. You can activate P-switches through bridges, so it's a really good way to have the player not be able to carry a P-switch to avoid possible cheese later in the level. It can also be used to keep the player running and activate a P-switch. Generally, placing enemies in blocks are very trolly and can annoy the player, especially avoid big enemies and boo rings. Whenever you hit or destroy a question mark block and reset the room, it doesn't go back to its normal form, unless it has a vine in it. Then we can use a reset door to retry a challenge, and the question mark blocks will be back to normal. This can fix a challenge like this that would normally force the player to reset the level or die. Hard blocks work much better by themselves in 1 block thick rows than ground blocks do, so use these instead. Never have invisible block traps like this. All they do is annoy the player. Also, the laughing sound effect is annoying as heck, so I just wouldn't use it in your levels probably ever. When rewarding the player with invisible blocks, I would stick with 1-ups or coins, as giving them a shortcut or a power-up might make them think they were just there for the creator to cheat his own level and upload it. Never try to find the hidden block levels, as they are annoying and unfun. Thwomps activate donut platforms whether they're just standing on it idly or ground pounding on it. So that means you can make levels or situations where you have to jump on falling donut platforms. No blocks can be activated by pretty much anything that can fall onto it. This means you can have setups like this where it needs to drop down a vine or something off the top of the screen. If a Koopa without its shell goes onto a music block in the Mario World theme, then it will make a barking noise if it's green or a meowing if it's red. Take a listen. You can activate POW blocks by ground pounding on them while they're on the same block as the cloud. Ice blocks can be used as windows if you want to make buildings for your level. So, onto the items. Coins are good for directing players. Use them to show players where to go, and never use them to lead to a death pit. Also, coins can be small rewards for doing small challenges, or going through, say, an alternative route. Big coins are great ways to reward the player for trying to do something difficult or exploring. Generally, you'll want the big coin's value to go up based on how hard the challenge was, or how hard it was to find the big coin. When making levels around collecting pink coins, always have 1 pink coin to spare over the key door. That way, the player won't die with the key, as if that does happen, then the player has to do the whole level again, as it resets their pink coin counter. Using the progressive power-ups can be a cool way to reward the player, such as here, if you're able to make it through a section without being hit, then you'd be able to get a power-up that would allow you to get, say, a big coin. Also, when making standard levels, progressive power-ups are usually a good thing to include anyway. Don't make infinite fireball spawning Bowser fights. They have been done to death. They take way too long to do and aren't challenging. Try to make your boss fights unique and interesting instead of just doing this. If you have a level based around the Superball power-up, then it would always be nice to include an indicator block so the player knows where to stand when throwing the Superball. Okay, so now we're coming up to the theme exclusive items, so I'll have one for each. When jumping normally with a big mushroom, Mario will break the blocks below him. However, when he is in a Goomba shoe, he doesn't, so maybe you could create a level that requires you to get both of the power-ups. This next one is more of a playing tip, but when doing your tail attack, you're able to attack enemies in front of Mario's face, instead of on the same layer as the tail, but only if the enemy is on a semi-solid, bridge, donut, mushroom platform, lift, or cloud. Using a double-speed backward conveyor will give Mario enough speed to initiate flight by the end. This is the shortest way to start flight as far as I'm aware. You can also make a launch chamber attached to the machine, and you can either keep it open, or block it off with turn blocks to force the player to spin fly. Using twisters will allow Mario to spin with the propeller again, without touching the ground. That way you can make challenging propeller-based levels where you don't have to touch the ground. Levels where you just use a star to kill everything without any challenge isn't fun, so if your level is based around stars, then try to make them interesting. 1-ups are pretty much the perfect item to put into hidden blocks, as they only reward the player and not the developer. These are good for rewarding exploration. If you have a level where a rotten mushroom chases the player, then having no blocks will allow the rotten mushroom to follow the players even after big jumps. Since Goomba shoes jump towards Mario, you can make interesting mechs such as this to create a unique boss fight. When playing with Yoshi, if you tug behind you then hold forward, you'll get a huge boost which can help you make hard jumps. Also, while the Mario World Yoshi can tongue through walls, the Mario U cannot, so keep that in mind when using a level based around Yoshi. We then get into the enemy wheels. So in the nighttime version of the Sky theme, Goombas swim around in the sky. You could use this mechanic to have some tricky jumps to get up onto a platform or make a difficult jump. Galoombas can be thrown around, so this could be used to make the player carry one to activate contraptions like this. Koopas can get removed from their shells in Mario World and 3D World themes, which means you can make levels like this where you have to jump on the Koopas twice. Using wings on Buzzy Beetles can make them be used as platforms, and you can make a whole level revolving around these flying mechanics. Shelmets are able to be fired from Bill Blasters, and since they are already active in motion, they can be used to activate on-off blocks or even ride. Also, be careful and make sure the player can't get a Shelmet from the Bill Blaster to possibly cheese the level later, unless you do want them to. In New Super Mario Bros. U and Mario World, you can spin jump on spike tops and climb walls with them. This can make for a unique and challenging level. When making a shooter level, try to avoid overusing the winged Spinies, as they fire out 4 projectiles and it can get chaotic very fast. The flying Spinies are good for these types of levels, just don't overuse them. In the Mario 1 and 3 theme, you can make a setup like this to make sure the player can't take more than one Shelmet. However, this doesn't work in the Mario U or World theme unless the player is big and ducking, which is very strange. Using the Blooper nanny, you can create a challenging platforming section like this. However, I would only use one per section and have a reset door due to how unpredictable bloopers can be. Now this next one isn't really a tip, but I've got about 200 hours in this game and I've played like about 3,000 levels, and I have never seen this mechanic used in a single level. So when Yoshi swallows a Cheep Cheep that's been in poison, he can actually shoot out poison, which is pretty cool. I don't believe it's any different from fire, but this is still a really neat detail that they actually put in the game. Using fire piranha plants, you can stack them with conveyors and you can create a unique and interesting boss fight where hundreds of fireballs are being shot at you and you have to try to avoid them until a timer runs out. Keep in mind that this machine can get pretty laggy if you use too many though. Now our next item is the Munchers, which in my opinion is one of the most useful items in both Mario Maker 1 and 2. Since I want to get to the other items, I'm only going to cover 6 things that the Muncher can do. 1, they can hold up enemies in place, which can be useful in the Koopa scenario I showed earlier, or even setting up the mech I showed earlier. They can crush enemies, which means combined with the seesaw you can create a boss fight like this one. They can activate P-switches, which means they can be used in all kinds of timer setups like this one here. Since they can be attached to tracks, this basically makes them moving spikes, and since Mario can't go through them, they're good for situations like this. They are solid, which means Mario can run or wall jump off of them, and they can also be used as a helmet for enemies to make them invincible to Mario's jumps. Munchers are super useful, so I might make a video on them in the future, but anyway, moving on, don't have surprise Thwomps, as they can make the player feel cheated. Make sure the player has enough time to see and react to a Thwomp. Using Monty molds, you can create a sort of mech design where you can control and ride across spikes or other dangerous obstacles. I always like levels that do this, so I'd love to see it more. You could use rocky wrenches and Bill Blasters to make randomly shifting floors for a boss fight or even just a normal level. Just make sure the Bill Blasters are tall enough where the wrenches can't hit the player, and the Bill Blasters have coins in them so that they can't hurt the player. Hammer Bros, due to their random nature, do not work well in large groups or in cramped spaces. Same thing goes with the chain chomps. With Wigglers on tracks, you can ride it and have a little obstacle course. Using Boos, you can make a don't look forward or backward room where if you look in a certain direction, the player will die. When using this though, make sure you tell the player in the title or something, as they might get confused on why they died. When using lava bubbles, you should have some sort of indication of where they are, such as coins or mushroom stems, so the player can be prepared. Don't make levels where you just have to blow up a ton of bombs, as they aren't fun. These are known as bomb excavation. Generally needing to blow up 1 or 2 is okay, but have it at least in an interesting way with maybe enemies getting in your way. Dry bones on tracks in the Mario World theme can throw projectiles and can make for a good survival room where it's timer based or platform based. Dry bone shells will allow the player to ground pound in every theme they're in, so maybe you could have some sort of puzzle or secret using this mechanic, as it probably isn't too well known. While fish bones normally just fall and die when not underwater, In the airship at night theme, they can actually swim in the air, which can allow for some platforming challenges like this one. Like bombs, Magikoopa excavation is not fun, I would say even worse. Also, like Hammer Bros, they don't work in cramped spaces or in big groups. When using Bowser in a level, be mindful that his fireballs will start shooting even at very far distances, so try to keep that in mind when making a level with Bowser in it. Also, generally 3 Bowsers in the same place is not fun, and is way too cramped. Bowser Jr. is able to jump through floors and ceilings, so if you have a boss fight with him, don't place the boss room directly above or below a different part of the level. 5 Boom Booms in one small space isn't very good level design, so be conservative with them. Generally, you're only going to want 1 or maybe 2 per level. When using Angry Suns, you should always design your level around them, since they're pretty much always on screen. When using Lakitus, be mindful that the player might steal their cloud. Even if it doesn't seem like that, there's always a chance, so be prepared for it. Maybe have some walls that block off parts of the level, so even if they steal the cloud, they can't go through most of the level. Maybe make them stealing the cloud intentional and add some secrets like a big coin or 1-up. Fire Clown Car excavation, surprise, also isn't fun. With fire and normal clown cars, you're able to make fun aerial-based levels. Just don't put too many enemies, as it can get cramped. Also, clown car spike maces generally aren't fun, at least not cramped ones. Make them at the very least a little bit open. Finally, onto the gizmos. We have the burners, and I would suggest not having 1x1 burner sections like this, as they really slow down the flow of the level. For Bill Blasters, if you're using them as floors or walls, like in some of the examples I showed earlier, then always fill them with coins or another unharmful item, as there's a chance that a stray bullet can get launched and kill the player, or at least damage them. In 3D World, you can use the cat suit to send Banzai bills into different directions. Placing cannons on top of enemies can make them look like they're shooting at you. They even turn around when the enemies do, which is really cool. This technique works very well on airship levels, as it kinda looks like they're guards. Icicles are pretty surprisingly useful. They can be used to activate on-off blocks and even damage bosses. Also, once something is loaded in, as long as they stand on ice blocks, they'll be loaded in forever, which is pretty neat. They can also be stood on, which can lead to a challenging platforming section, where the floor falls to maybe get a secret or just progress through the level. Twisters, interestingly, don't activate seesaws, which I guess makes sense as they are floating, so you could make mini challenges like this one. Never put keys in invisible blocks, and always make them obvious where they are. When a player has to go back through a level to get a key, that can be very frustrating, especially if they die on the way back or can't go back. Never have Picador. Now, having a choose your path sort of deal is okay. What I mean is, don't have, say, 4 doors and have 3 lead to immediate death. They are frustrating and dumb. Doors are also good for resetting rooms. Like I said in some earlier examples, these allow the player to retry a challenge without needing to die. When using a P-switch, try your best to avoid stuff like this, where an exit of a room is blocked off by bricks and you have to wait. This really throws off the flow of a level. I would suggest trying to build your level around the P-switch timer, but I do understand that this is sometimes unavoidable. Since POWs only destroy the bottom enemy in a stack, or if thrown the one it hits as well, you can create scenarios where you have to hit multiple POWs like this. So I think this is a great time to mention a key part in designing levels, cheese prevention. Now, cheese is basically when a player cheats a part of the level, or does something that wasn't intended to make the level easier. I'm using the spring as an example, as there's a lot of tricks that more skilled players can do, such as spring jumps to avoid major sections of levels. And it's not just spring jumps, there's POW jumps, P-switch jumps, shell jumps, and many more advanced tricks that can be used to cheese your level. What I would do is get familiar with these strategies and figure out ways to prevent them from happening in your level. A lot of these can be pretty easily fixed, so I would definitely suggest looking into them. Putting vines in a block on tracks can create a challenge where the player has to stay on a vine while it travels through a long section with spikes and saws. Please don't make arrows point in the wrong direction, as all it does is confuse the player and annoy them. When running into a checkpoint, it'll save your red coin status, and you're able to effectively have infinite checkpoints, as you are able to reactivate the same checkpoint after hitting another one in a sub-area. This technique will allow you to make levels where you have to go through a bunch of mini-challenges and collect red coins, and then effectively save your progress after every room. Now, I'm not the first person to come up with this idea, but I definitely want more people to make levels like this. Now, this may be a bit of an odd one, but don't use lifts on long tracks with levels tagged as multiplayer versus, because it's not fun to have to wait for the platform if you die. Using multiple skull coasters can lead to a fun, challenging level where you have to jump between them to avoid obstacles. So for this next one, I made a whole video on the seesaw, so go check that out if you want some more tips. But as an example, one from the video is that you can launch things by ground pounding on them, or a thwomp landing on them, which will launch anything. Grinders don't look half bad as wheels for vehicles. Bumpers are very useful as they allow anything to pass through them but Mario himself, so you can use them to say edges of boss arenas, blocking off an area that Mario has to throw or drop something into, etc. Skewers are very useful for timer setups. Claws can be used with tracks to grab items. Just make sure your setup works well, as sometimes getting the claws to work can be very annoying. I'll be grouping the on-off and dotted line blocks together. Don't create things like this where it's just a waiting game while you hold forward, as it throws off the level's pace. Using shells to activate on-off blocks, you can create tight timing platforming sections. You can use them to fill in gaps and try to carry a red Koopa over to maybe use its shell or to have it tip over a seesaw. There's a ton of possibilities with these two items, and I've only just scratched the surface. Don't make 3 wide, fast snake block sections mandatory for your level, because they are super difficult, and they're especially difficult if you don't know the level. Maybe you could use these as a small challenge to get a 1-up. Don't make them mandatory. Also, don't make long and drawn out snake block sections with no enemies. Make it exciting instead of just tedious. Like many things mentioned here, use fire bars and moderate... Oh no. One-way walls can be very useful in levels, in say New Super Mario Bros., where you have to wall jump like this, which can be very rewarding and very fun. Conveyors can be good for changing the speed of, say, shell timers and other types of timers. Finally, we have tracks. Now, they're very useful for many things, but I will say when needing to ride a platform that's on a track, it's usually best to have a reset door, as the player might do something silly and have it go on without them, and then have to wait a long time expecting for it to come back, when it might not. Also, with on-off blocks, you can have choose your own path scenarios. Just don't have one lead to death, and make each path an actual way to win. It's okay if one is harder than the other, just make sure you're able to win in both areas. Well, we are finally done. No. Okay, super speed through 3D World. Long clear pipe sections are very boring, so don't include long sections like this in your level. If you want a permanent spike, then have the red spike version. As long as there aren't any on-off switches in the level, they will remain permanently out. Climbing Semisolids with Cat Mario can lead to unique challenges and boss fights. Hammer excavation is not fun. Like spike tops, you can ride ant troopers up walls or just along the ground. Skip squeaks can block items, so maybe you could have a challenge where you have to jump at the right moment to get it. Stingby are good for those cat climbing semi-solid sections I mentioned before, as they stay on one layer, so maybe you could have them guard like a line of coins. Piranha creepers have solid bodies, so maybe you could make Mario have to defeat them so he's able to pass, kinda like a gate. With hop chops, you can make a section where you have to attract it towards a wall so you can jump over it. When using Meowser, you're pretty much gonna have to design your whole level around it unless he's in a sub-world, because his attacks are very chaotic and he can load in very easily. When you have a Pom-Pom boss fight, make sure she can't teleport outside of the boss fight room. Charvargs and Porcupuffers should be used in moderation, as they get very chaotic very fast. Bullies can be used as skip squeaks to make jump detectors. The Koopa car shouldn't just be used as a hold forward and run over a ton of enemy type level. Add some challenge where you have to jump or switch directions. Since crates can float on lava, you can ride them up a lava rising section of a sub area, for example, and have the boxes get blown up as you go, making your area smaller and smaller. Since warp boxes are one-way trips, make sure you don't need anything from a previous room to beat your levels. Also, make sure you can't go backwards with a warp box after getting a checkpoint, as it could lead to a soft lock or an immediate death. Exclamation mark block trolls, like this one, are very annoying, don't do them. Blinking blocks can be used as great timers. Same with the track blocks. Hide some rewards in some of your trees to reward the player just for exploring. Don't do this for every tree, but just a few. And finally, our final item, the mushroom platforms, work better for car levels than springs, as they don't have the chance of making the player crash their car. So I would say use these instead. But anyways, that's it for this really long video. If you enjoyed this video at any point, please make sure to give it a like or even consider subscribing, as I work really hard on this video, so it would mean a lot. But if you guys want to see more videos like this, then let me know in the comments. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.